The first option that you have, the first offer that you have is that you get one PhD, then a second PhD, then a third PhD, and you are a walking, talking encyclopedia. So, are you getting that? That's the first offer. You're able to become the Einstein of our time, the genius of our times, all kind of knowledge in your mind. The second offer is that you can enjoy life to the full. Now, for each of us, enjoyment is different. So, for someone, enjoyment is eating what they like eating, sweets and maybe burgers and pizzas. And of course, since you're in Hyderabad, it has to also be biryani, right? Biryani? Yes, okay. So, biryani and whatever you think of as enjoyable. Maybe fast cars, you have good roads in Hyderabad to drive on, or a Ducati motorbike, whatever is your sense of the greatest fun you can have or enjoyment you can have. The third, so you got the first one? Yes. Mind, learning, education, Einstein. Second, enjoyment. Third offer is you're the richest person on earth. Okay? Dislodging our Ambanis and Adanis and, right at the top. There is nothing you do not have, you cannot possess. And the fourth option is you become the most powerful person on earth. The most powerful person means, you tell 100 people to jump off a cliff, they will jump off the cliff. If you tell you want to attack a country, you send your soldiers and you can attack another country. Are you getting the four offers? Okay, so the first, I'm just repeating it. It's all about the mind. You're the most intelligent person on earth. Second offer is enjoyment. The greatest pleasure or the fun you can have. Third is, let me put it as one word, wealth. Okay, you have all the wealth that you can think of. The fourth is power. Okay, the most powerful person. How many want the first one? Think and answer. You can't choose all four. How many want the first one? Walking, talking encyclopedias. So few. 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought at least in Hyderabad I'll get a better number. Okay, good. The number is increasing. Is that it? So you can't put your hand up a second time. Second, okay, enjoyment. How many for enjoyment? Put your hand right up. Okay. Okay, great. Third one is wealth. How many for wealth? Okay, a number of you have not put your hand up for anything. I'm keeping an eye out. Okay. Okay, that's wealth. And the fourth is power. Oh, okay. That's what you're waiting for. You want to be the most powerful person. We're going to look at a person who lived around 3,000 years ago. His name is synonymous with the idea of wisdom. Any guesses who it is? Solomon. Okay, great. He's the wisest person who ever lived, and as of today, when you use the word Solomon, the word association that comes with the word Solomon, even if you go into the marketplace, even if you go to a corporate office, the word that comes is wisdom. I'm going to do a little study on this man, Solomon, this evening. If you have your Bibles with you, you can open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes. If you don't have your Bibles with you and you have your mobile phones with you, you can still get your Bible on your mobile phone. So open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes and keep your Bibles on Ecclesiastes. I'm going to read a few verses from the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay, let me give you some bad news. When I was traveling, as soon as I reached Pune airport, my watch has stopped working. That's a bad news, but the good news for you is there's a clock over there. So I'll be able to keep time. Okay, so Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 12, he says, I, preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. Now look at verse 16. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. So you can see right in the beginning of the book of Ecclesiastes, what does Solomon say? Solomon says this, he is more wiser, I have more wisdom than all who were over Jerusalem before me. He claims for himself that he is the wisest person, and his mind has been engrossed in wisdom and knowledge. Turn to chapter 2. Now we think that it's only wisdom, but let's see a little bit more about Solomon, the King Solomon. Chapter 2, I'm going to read a little long passage, verses 1 to 11. I want you to follow closely with me. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish? I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of my life. Verse 4, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself, from which to irrigate a field, a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homegrown slaves. I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers, the pleasure of men, many concubines. Verse 9, then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom stood by me. All that my eye desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of my labor, and this was the reward for all my labor. Thus I considered all my activities which my hand had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind. In these two passages you can see, Solomon says, remember the first choice you had? Walking, talking encyclopedia. There was no one greater than Solomon, not just in his time, but in the time preceding him, before him. There was no man who was as wise as Solomon ever. At the time that he lived, there was no man who was as wise as Solomon ever. The second thing you can see is he enjoyed all of the pleasures that was ever possible. He enjoyed all of the pleasures that were all possible. He says to himself, you see in chapter 2 verse 1, he's talking to himself. And what does he say? He tells himself, oh, enjoy yourself. See, he says, enjoy yourself. He's telling himself, enjoy yourself. The third thing he does is he shows his wealth. How does he show his wealth? Houses, vineyards, gardens, parks, slaves, flocks, and everything that a wealthy man could possess. And the fourth thing you see about him is that I became great and increased in power more than any who preceded me. So you had to choose between four. Solomon had all four. He had all four. He had a great intellect, wisest of men. Not only was he a great intellect, he was also a person who had tested himself with pleasure. You can see that he says, I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine and my mind was guiding me wisely. So even when he was enjoying the pleasure, most of us, when we're enjoying pleasure, our minds are not active. But his mind was active because he was a wise man. Remember that? His mind was active and he was examining what pleasure is doing to him. How many of you, when you eat something that you enjoy, remember we were talking about enjoyment and pleasure. How many of you, when you eat something and you are enjoying it, ask yourself what this enjoyment is doing to me? What this pleasure is doing to me? But Solomon was a person who was thinking about what is the pleasure doing to him? How is this pleasure affecting him? And he says, until I could see there is no good for the Son of Man to do the few years of their life. The third thing he does is works, wealth. He spent his wealth on whatever his heart desired. If you look at verse 10, I know it's a dream that many of us have. And I hope it's not really a dream that we have, but it's a dream that really many people have. In verse 10 he says, all that my eye desired, I did not refuse them. All that my eye desired, I did not refuse them. One day I was sitting in a restaurant with a group of friends, and we were just talking about some things, and we were talking about the cost of something. And everything has a cost. So when we were talking about the cost of things, one of my friends, he made this comment to me. He said, I never look at the MRP. You know what is MRP, right? What is MRP? Maximum retail price. He said, I never look at the MRP. I don't know how many of you desire to have a lifestyle where you never look at the MRP. Now he was fooling himself, he was fooling me. I'll tell you why. Because if he wanted tomorrow to buy a BMW car, does he look at the MRP? Okay, if he had the wealth, he doesn't. The wealth to buy a BMW car, does he have the wealth to buy a Gulfstream aircraft? Still MRP came in. But if he desires to buy more than a Gulfstream, a Boeing 777 aircraft for himself, can he do it? Everyone has to look at the MRP. But Solomon did not look at MRP. He says in verse 10, all that my eye desired, I did not refuse them. No MRP for Solomon. All that my eye desired. That means if he saw something and he wanted it, he had it. Then in the same verse he says, I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. So you can see when you talk about pleasure, Solomon says, I have peeked out on pleasure. Wisdom, I have peeked out. Pleasure, I have topped it up to the maximum, and it is beyond and overflowing. Works, you can see the works are such a lot. He builds vineyards, gardens, parks, and so on and so forth. His works are also at the top. And then when it comes to power, in verse 9 he says, I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. But then his summary of this whole thing is in verse 11. His summary of seeking after wisdom, is seeking after pleasure, is seeking after wealth, is seeking after power, is summarized in verse 11 where he says, I considered all my activities which my hands had done and all the labor I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity. It was striving after the wind. You know what is striving after the wind? All is meaningless, he's saying. All is meaningless. It is striving after the wind. What is striving after the wind? It is like chasing the wind and trying to catch it. Can you ever catch the wind? We know we can't hold it even if you're stationary, but if a breeze is blowing and we are trying to catch the breeze or run faster than the breeze or trying to catch the breeze, can we ever think of catching it? And he says, a life that is in pursuit of just knowledge for its own sake, pleasure for its own sake, wealth for its own sake, and power for its own sake is running after the wind, is striving after the wind. He says everything is meaningless. I don't know how many of you have thought of this. Some of our wealthy, not just in India, across the world, some of our wealthy people in the world, they have enough laid up in terms of wealth, at least in just one of these 3 or 4 categories, in wealth for maybe 50 generations. Do you agree with me? Why is it that they still run after it? Because that does not satisfy. We still search for a satisfaction beyond knowledge. We still search for satisfaction beyond pleasure. We still seek for something more than wealth. We still seek something more than power. If you look around you and look at people who are chasing any of them, they are all dissatisfied people. Jack Higgins, he was an author of a famous book called The Eagle Has Landed. I don't know how many of you have read this book called Eagle Has Landed. It was a bestseller at its time. He sold more than a few million copies of that book. And he started off small in life. He worked in the army. He was a Britisher. He worked in the army. And then after he worked in the army, while he was in the army, he started writing, and he wrote this book called The Eagle Has Landed. And this became a bestseller. And anyone who becomes famous and popular, what do others want to do with them? Interview them. Am I right? Anyone becomes famous, you have a interview. So there was an interview of Jack Higgins, and one of the questions that he was asked is, what do you now know that you would have liked to know when you were a little child? Remember, he's now famous. He's on the top of the literary world. You know, he's considered the best writer. His books have sold millions, and he's on the bestseller list. And now at this time, when you're a famous, well-known person, what is it that you would have liked to have known when you were a little child? What you would like to have known when you were a little child? And Jack Higgins' answer was that when you get to the top, there is nothing there. When you get to the top, there is what over there? Nothing over there. He had come up from way in the bottom and climbed up the ladder. How many of you have heard of a person by the name of Boris Becker? Can I see your hands? Oh yes, I know most of this generation doesn't know Boris Becker. You know, Boris Becker was the youngest player who ever won Wimbledon. He still has a record of being the youngest player who has won Wimbledon twice. He's maybe in his mid-50s now. Boris Becker, in his time, he was 16 years old. How many of you are below 16 here? The rest of you are all above 16, right? At 16, he had won Wimbledon. He was a German player. He had won Wimbledon at 16. And Boris Becker, when he had won Wimbledon, he was world famous. 40 years ago or 30 years ago, he was a well-known name. It was a household name. It's a name that went across the globe. And remember, that was not the internet time. It was a time where only television was the greatest medium of all. And in that period, Boris Becker was a household name. Boris Becker, of late, in his recent times, he's been imprisoned. Now, I said he's in his 50s. He's been imprisoned for tax fraud. He has gone through many challenging situations in his life. Boris Becker, he says this about his life.
He says, I had won Wimbledon as the youngest player. I had won Wimbledon twice before, once as the youngest player. I was rich. I had all the material possessions I needed. Money, cars, women, everything. This is a cliche. It is the old song of the movie and pop stars who commit suicide. They have everything and yet they are so unhappy. I had no inner peace. I was a puppet on a string. I was a puppet on a string. See what he says. I was rich. Not as rich as Solomon, but I was rich. I had all the material possessions I needed, whether it is cars, money, women, everything. And he says, but this is a cliche. It's just an idea that when you're rich, everything is good. He says, it's the old song of the movie and pop stars who commit suicide. Why? Because I had no inner peace, he says. I had no inner peace. I was a puppet on a string. This evening, as you have come here, I want to ask you to examine your own dreams, your own desires, your own hopes for the future. Is your dream and your desire that you will become the next Einstein of this generation? Or is your dream and desire that you will live a life of enjoying pleasure at any cost, whenever and wherever it is available? Or is your dream that you will gain in wealth? Or is your dream that you will become powerful? From Solomon, we can learn that it is all meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Jack Higgins, what does he say about it? When you get to the top, there is nothing there. Boris Becker, about the same thing, what does he say? I was a puppet on a string. I was a puppet on a string. These things cannot satisfy. Now, Ecclesiastes is a beautiful book in the Bible. And if you read the first 11 chapters of Ecclesiastes, it's very interesting that he does not, in random places he does, but not overall, he's not bringing in the picture of God. He's trying to see how is life to be enjoyed under the sun. That's the second most common phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes. The first most common phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes is meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. That's the first most common phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes. The second most common phrase is, he says, under the sun. Under the sun. What he's talking about is, his life is lived under the sun. Nothing above or beyond the sun is influencing his life. So that's the picture he gives in the first 11 chapters of the Bible, of Ecclesiastes. Now, if you look at Solomon's life, you will wonder, can a person who had it all in the end say that meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless? There's a writer by the name of Albert Camus. Now, Albert Camus was an atheist. He did not believe in God. He did not want to have God in his idea of the world and life. Albert Camus won the Nobel Prize for Literature in the 1920s sometime. But he wrote a book called The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, this book has a very interesting story that a person, his life's main aim in life, or the only thing that he does in life, is that he rolls a stone up a steep hill. Okay, I'm sure all of us as children have kicked stones down the road. Have you done that? Coming back from school, you kick a stone down a road and you try to take it all the way till you're house or vice versa till your school. So this person is not kicking a stone, he's rolling a boulder, a large boulder, up a steep incline. And he keeps rolling the stone up till the top of the incline. And finally, with great exertion, huffing and panting, he reaches the top. But when he reaches the top, what he has to do is to leave his hands, and the boulder or the stone rolls back down to the bottom. Now this is a story of the myth of Sisyphus, Now what does this man have to do? He just comes down and again rolls the boulder up that same incline, takes it right till the top and lets it go, and it rolls back down to the bottom. Now Albert Camus is trying to portray over here a man who's rolling a stone up an incline and letting it go, and the boulder keeps coming back down to the bottom. Now what is he trying to say in this story? Remember, he's a person who does not believe in God. He's trying to portray how a person can find meaning in life. Now how does he find meaning in life? It may be the boulder of knowledge. You roll it up, you roll it up, you roll it up, you gain in knowledge, and that's all you can do. You reach the top, and then at the top, you have to let it go. Or it might be the boulder of pleasure. Pleasure and pleasure, up the slope it goes, but at the end, down it will come again. Or it could be wealth. You roll it up, and then it comes back down again. Or it can be power. It goes up and then it comes down. Albert Camus is saying, don't search for meaning in life. There is no meaning in life. Life is just this process of rolling this boulder up. There's nothing more to life than that. But very interestingly, in his book, the first line of that book, the very first line in that book is this statement: there is only one truly serious philosophical problem. Are you getting it? There is only one serious problem, or one serious philosophical problem. Remember, he's going to talk about the story of rolling the boulder up. And he says there is only one serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. If life is only about rolling a boulder up, is there any purpose? You just say, I'm tired of rolling the boulder up. So that is why Camus understands this problem. That why should I keep rolling it up since there is no greater picture in it? I just let it go and it keeps coming back down. And so at some time, suicide is the exit from this life over here. So he says there is only one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Solomon in chapter 2 verse 11, he says, I considered all the activities which my hands had done and the labor which I had done, and he said, behold, all was vanity and striving after wind. In verse 8 he says, all things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. Now look at what he says. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. Just hold on for a minute. The eye is not satisfied with seeing. The ear is not filled with hearing. Does something come to your mind? Where is it that you seek for satisfaction with your eyes and your ears? Some of you know the answer. On your mobile devices. 3,000 years ago, this man wrote that we will try to find contentment with seeing and seeing and seeing. Have you noticed there are times that you do not know why you're picking up your phone, but you have to pick it up. And you do not know what you're looking for in your phone, but you have to see something on your phone. You do not know what you're wanting to listen to, but you still keep trying to listen to something. Have you searched your heart and seen that's true about you? And it's true about me. And today, technology has made possible what was only available to a king in those days. The king could have whatever he wanted in terms of the pleasure of seeing and of hearing. But today, the same pleasure is yours in your hand. Now, this is not to say that the mobile phone is evil. But all that we are saying is, somewhere in our heart, we are searching. We are searching for significance, we are searching for meaning, we are searching for purpose, and we are searching for contentment. That search for contentment does not get over. Now, this evening we don't want to leave us disappointed, saying that, oh, this really means that everything is futile. And then some of us go back with Albert Camus' philosophy that there is only one serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. No, that's not it. You know, when Solomon finishes his book, he comes to chapter 12. It's 11 chapters, I said, of life under the sun. Life under the sun. And everything in life under the sun, he says, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. But then in chapter 12, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Remember your Creator when? In the days of your youth. Before the days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them. Before the days draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them. You know, when I was a young boy, I used to be taken to church by my parents. I'm sure, how many of you suffered the same way? Don't want to put your hands up. Okay, it's okay. Okay? Suffered because our parents forced us to go. I remember I used to escape when I could out of one of the doors, go upstairs, and there was a small little hall. We used to play on the typewriter. Those days we had the Remington typewriter. We didn't have keyboards, tuck, tuck, and when the noise comes, we would get caught. But I remember going for Sunday school also in those days, not because I wanted to, but because that was something that my parents wanted me to do. And the Sunday school teachers used to talk about God, having a relationship with God, having intimacy with God. And I remember in those days, I still remember vividly the thought that was in my mind. It's nice, good idea. Maybe somebody should try it. It's not me. Somebody should try this idea about God and relationship with Him and all. But maybe when I'm old, I have nothing more to do in life. Remember, I was in my teens probably. 12, 13. When I am old and I have nothing more to do in life, then I will start thinking about eternal matters. I will think about God. I will think about a relationship with God. I'll think about how God can make a difference in my life. Let me wait for that time. That's what I used to think. And then I still remember I went for a youth camp. And at the youth camp, we had small groups. And I was in one of the groups. And you heard of peer pressure? Everyone heard of peer pressure? Everyone has experienced peer pressure? Yes? I want to put peer pressure on you to say yes at least. Okay, but we have all experienced peer pressure. There was a small group. And one of the questions in the list of questions in the youth group was, are you ready to meet God if He comes tomorrow? Are you ready to meet with Christ if He comes tomorrow? And everyone in the group said, yes, they are, yes, they are, yes, they are, yes, they are. Around 6 or 7 of us. And I still remember when it came to me, I did not usually give in to peer pressure. I said no. And the person who was the leader of the group, I still remember her, I know her. And I still remember she insisted and continued, why are you not ready? I said, I don't know, I just don't want to meet Him. I thought it was not an important thing to meet with my Creator, my God. Whether I believed in Him, whether I had a vague sense of Him, I don't have any memory, but I didn't want to meet with Him. Many of us here are in that situation in life. We think that, yes, we'll think of God later. We'll think of God when we grow old. Let's make a career for ourselves. Let's make a future for ourselves. Let me get my dream job. Let me get married to that dream person, hunky-dory, handsome guy or that beautiful girl, whichever that case may be. I can see some of you already looking cheerful about it. But let all that get settled and then maybe we will think about God. But Solomon, the man of wisdom, ends the book by saying, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Remember your days in the Creator of your youth, or your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no delight in them. Why is he saying that? Because actually, in knowing and finding the Creator is the greatest delight we will ever have. We tend to think that when I become a disciple of Jesus or I become a follower of Christ, what is going to happen is all my joys are going to be finished, all my knowledge is going to be flattened out, I'm going to be a nobody, a person of no significance. My parents, when I said I'm resigning my job for ministry, they said, then what, you will go around with a cloth Jola bag? That's a picture of the Christian life. But here he says, remember your Creator before you reach the stage when you realize you have no delight in them, because there is the greatest delight in God Himself. And when you find the greatest delight in God Himself, by the way, you don't lose knowledge, you don't lose pleasure, you don't lose wealth, you don't lose power. You gain all of it in a different way. You gain all of it in a different way. The greatest knowledge that we can have is the knowledge of God Himself. I think that's what Ebenezer prayed for this evening before we started. The greatest knowledge that we can have is not what we learn from our textbooks, knowing God Himself. He says, I would not find delight in them. And then in verse 6 of chapter 12, I will quickly close now. Chapter 12, verse 6, remember Him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. The pitcher by the well is shattered and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. There will come a time we think our lives are contained in a golden bowl. All of us think our own lives are in a golden bowl. And well, our lives are in a golden bowl because we have been made in the image of God Himself. It is a golden bowl. But the golden bowl is hanging on a silver thread. But this golden bowl and the silver thread is not eternal. One day, that silver thread will snap. And when the silver thread snaps, the golden bowl falls down and is crushed. We don't know when that day is. It could be when, just recently I heard a friend saying that he lost one of his best friends to a heart attack at 28 years of age. It's not to frighten you, but just to say this is what reality is. That golden bowl and that silver thread. The silver thread will snap, he says, and the golden bowl is crushed. And then he says the pitcher is crushed. The pitcher by the well. You know what is a pitcher used for? Containing water or any liquid. The pitcher that contains the water of our life, when it breaks, our life spills and can't be recovered again. And then he says that the wheel at the cistern is crushed. And then verse 7 he says, the dust returns to the earth as the spirit will return to God. We will all have to face that reckoning. There's nobody who will not. That thread will break one day. The bowl will be crushed one day. The pitcher will be broken. The life of us will float in, and our spirit will ascend to God, and then we will have to give an account to the maker of all things. And the preacher therefore says in verse 8, vanity of vanity, meaning meaningless. If this is not there, everything is meaningless. I want to close with one verse from Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28 and to 30. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Our life does not have to be like that of Jack Higgins when we find that there is nothing at the top. It doesn't have to be like Boris Becker, where we feel that we are just a puppet on a string. It doesn't have to be like Solomon, who forsook God later in his life and had to realize that everything was meaningless. But Jesus says, come, where? To me. He's giving an invitation. To whom is he giving that invitation? To all who are weary and heavy laden. Henry Thoreau, he made a comment. He said, all of us live lives of quiet desperation. All humans live lives of quiet desperation. You know what it means? We all are struggling through life in some way or the other. We don't show it to others. We don't even reveal our hearts to our friends. We don't let others know. But what is that burden you have come with? Jesus says, if you are weary and burdened, he's inviting you to himself. And then what does the invitation say? I will give you rest. I, Cyril, cannot give you rest. IYFC cannot give you rest. The government of India cannot give you rest, or the government of Telangana can't give you rest. There is only one who can give rest. And that is Jesus himself. And he's inviting us saying, if you are weary and burdened, whatever be your burden, come unto me and I will give you rest. And then he says, take my yoke upon you. And what is his yoke like? Verse 30 says, it is easy and light. It's not a heavy yoke. It is a yoke that makes other yokes light. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, and you will find rest for your souls. This evening I want to ask each of you, have you come to Jesus? Have you seen the one who is really able to give us rest? The one who can take our burdens. The one who makes our burdens light. He makes our yoke light and our burdens easy. And then he gives rest to our soul. Money cannot give rest to our soul. Power cannot give rest to our soul. Pleasure cannot give rest to our soul. Nothing can give rest to our soul. Only Jesus can give rest to our soul. And when you come to him, Romans promises us, with him he will give us all things. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Shall we pray?